Welcome to Co-Opinions. My name is Josh, and today I have Brent with me.
Yep.
So, Brent, it's been a while since you've been on, I believe, since the E3 episode,
yeah? Yeah, those hiatuses are...
Those hiatuses are pretty brutal, but hopefully we're back in the official swing of things. So let's talk about what you have played/beaten since the last time you were on.
Well, I've got to open up the old memory lock since it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Last time, I was in the middle of a vomit fest that was playing the original Perfect Dark game.
I'm about to say, you were getting some pretty wicked motion sickness off of that that you weren't expecting.
It was allergies, but yeah, it wasn't helping. I'm trying to think if I should give my slight review here of the game, or...
I would say hold off, because that's going to prompt a different podcast at a later date.
All right. Yeah, so I finally beat that. Then I moved on to knock out another rare replay game. Finally did Jet Force Gemini.
Right, and that's another thing that we'll go into.
But I did still really both enjoy both games. So, and then since we both last talked about what we played, I don't think you did that with Jake, I believe.
I mentioned that I had beaten Breath of the Wild,
okay.
But that's all I said. I even said if you'd listen to it, that I guess it only went up earlier today.
It did.
So... Anyways, I'd mentioned that we were going to talk about it extensively later.
We will, but we both got Switches, and I did beat Mario Kart for what that's worth.
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you did beat it on 200cc, which we are learning is no small feat.
It is not. And then I did sink a lot of time into Breath of the Wild.
Because it was super duper good.
So good.
And what else since then? Or has that been about it?
I mean, I'm still doing the Master Sword thing.
Yeah, but...
I plan on either starting up FF15 or Watch Dogs 2 here soon. So.
How novel. You're actually going to play a Final Fantasy game.
That is the plan, to play 3 Final Fantasy games here.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how that works out. You'll understand my cynicism.
Well, Final Fantasy 15 is one I've been looking forward to, so...
Yeah, well, you were looking for... Never mind. You have quite the list of games you were looking forward to.
Gotta be that guy.
I do have to be that guy, because some of those games I bought you...
One.
Doesn't matter. One collection.
The rest I have beaten, so...
Alright, yeah. Anyways, neither here nor there. You good on that, Brent?
Yeah, I'm good.
So I myself, since I'm on this much more frequently... I have been playing Arkham Knight, which you were super gung-ho to get me to start because you really want to do a series on the Rocksteady Batman games.
I do.
And I'm very close to the end right now. It's not a bad game, I've been over this, but it's a game that I feel I've kind of run its course. It's a very complex game. I'll run down the specifics of it when we actually have the episode, but when I'm done with it, I think I'm just going to move on directly to the next thing. And the next thing could be, we picked up Salt and Sanctuary for me and my girlfriend to potentially play through, which is the game by the Dishwasher people. Dishwasher. I also got a game by the Jotun people in. They kickstarted a game called Sundered. It's supposed to be a procedurally generated Metroidvania roguelike, which is a lot of buzzwords, but I love Jotun, so hopefully I'll be right on board with this. Or I could play FF12 The Zodiac Age because I got that for my recent birthday. Or I could play Horizon Zero Dawn. Really, the world is my oyster. More than likely, I'm probably going to play Danganronpa 2 because the third one comes out in September and I want to be ready for that. So, it's one of those things when a game's coming out. And as a quick aside, I saw right before we went on that the game, The Sexy Brutale, is coming to the Switch in Japan, which gives me hope that it's coming to the Switch in America, which would be great because I'm actually trying to do a mini-sode about The Sexy Brutale. We're just putting together all this small details. I really enjoyed that game, and I really want people to listen to that one because I will gladly do some free press for it. And my girlfriend who played through it with me, she actually is a lot more critical of it than I was, shockingly. How often does that happen?
It does not happen often.
Right? So, anyways, all that being said, I think we're about ready to move on to our topics for the evening, yeah?
What are you going to talk about?
Pokemon Go Fest? That's one of the topics. So, we are going back to a more traditional format for this episode, talking about several smaller topics, the first of which will be the Pokemon Go Fest. Me, my girlfriend, and Wheeler, the guy who had it sound for this, all went up to Chicago for the Pokemon Go Fest the week of July 22nd.
Yeah.
I'm going to focus solely on the Pokemon Go Fest because there's also a fun anecdote where we went into somebody else's Airbnb. I'll tell you about that later. But I'm going to focus just on the event. So when we went up there, we got our hands on these wristbands that let us get in an hour early, which filled us with a false sense of hope for how well this was going to go. And when we got there, the early entry was at 9 o'clock. So we got there at 8 o'clock. Without exaggeration, at 8 o'clock, the line was going around half of the park. Now, when they started letting people in at 9 o'clock, we managed to make it in within half an hour. So that actually isn't that bad for the size of the line we were in. And this is where the first and last smart thing they did happened. Because, are you familiar with spoofing? The concept behind it is you fake your GPS location.
Okay.
So to prevent this, what Niantic did, the developer of the game, was when you went in, they basically went old school PC verification on you. And they gave you an envelope that had a QR code in it. And to access the event, you had to spin one of the Pokestops. It prompted you for your QR code. And when you scanned your QR card, you were in the event. What I imagine was they set up a dedicated server, and when you scanned it, it gave you access to that server. That way other people couldn't slam it. This was about where it stopped being good, because I have no idea what their test cases were, because they knew the exact parameters behind this. From that point on, it became harder to log in. It was inconsistent. People started getting angry. It kept getting hotter. They knew there was going to be 20,000 people there. They knew how many tickets there were.
Bottles were thrown. Hedonism ensued.
There was no hedonism because I definitely would have remembered that. No, the thing that happened with the bottle, luckily it was only one bottle and it was near the end of the day, but people were getting so aggravated at the MC. I felt so bad for this girl because it wasn't her fault it wasn't working. But people, they needed a scapegoat. And it was the girl who came up on stage and was so bubbly and happy. And as it went on, people just kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And there were supposed to be 3 points during the day from 11 to 11:30, from 1 to 1:30, and 3 to 3:30, I believe, where you were supposed to be able to try and catch as many of a certain type of Pokemon. And people outside the park were supposed to catch as many as they could, because however many of those type you caught determined what bonus that you would be getting. So there were 6 different bonuses. Things like eggs hatch faster, you got buddy candy faster, you got double XP, spawn rate went up, etc., etc. The people outside the park determined how long that bonus would last for. If they caught enough to get bronze, the bonus lasted for 24 hours, silver 48 hours, and gold, it unlocked a special mystery challenge within the park. Everybody knew that special mystery challenge was going to be a legendary raid. And then if we managed to defeat the special event, it would be propagated out to everybody sooner rather than later. Nobody cared about any of that because nobody could log in for the first event, and it just kept going that way. By the time the event had been going for less than 3 hours, maybe 4, when the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, came out and said, "This is absolutely how we did not want this to go. I want you to know that we will be issuing you full refunds and $100 in in-game currency." Well, for somebody like us that only drove up from St. Louis, like, all right, I think I can be cool with that. And as the day went on, they just kept bringing out more people who really shouldn't have been up there. I felt so bad. Because at one point they go, "Hey, we have one of our network guys here to help explain what's going on." And having done a fair bit of technical support in my life, no, don't bring out the network guy. Do not throw a poor network guy under the bus. Like, here's Mike. Mike, you need to go back. This is not for you. And as Mike comes out, he's like, "Hey, just want to let you know we're dealing with 3 use cases here." Dude, you don't know how to talk to these people. They're throttling our data on one of the networks. And I go, how did they not plan for this? How did they not say to each of the 4 major providers, we need 20,000 dummy accounts so we can test in different parts of the park? Then just switch up whatever the ratios are going to be between
with those 4G networks, I mean, you don't need them.
You obviously don't need them. It's not like they ever throttle data for their own personal benefit ever.
No, never.
Anyways, so, and we've identified a crash bug. You don't say, Mike. You don't say you've identified a crash bug. And we've identified an authentication error. We don't want to hear what you have figured out. We want you to hear it's all better. So as the day went on and on and on, we were at the other side of the park and suddenly we hear, like, oh no, what did we miss? So we run over to the main stage and we're, Articuno, what? Articuno? So what we missed was everybody who was there was automatically going to get the legendary Pokemon Lugia. And because the Team Mystic had done the best that day, I guess that meant the most of them could log in, Articuno was going to be the first legendary bird that was available for raids. They also said in order to reduce server load, they had expanded the event 2 miles outside the park. So, and I quote, get out there and catch them. Don't tell us to leave. That is not a good... I know what you're trying to do is good, but your execution is sorely lacking. So, for reference, by the end of the day, they had Lugia raids live, Articuno raids live. They said we had unlocked... They were going to give all the bonuses, so all 6 bonuses for the next 48 hours, and they had extended the area and the event for essentially 36 hours because it was good until Monday morning. I knew personally that this was going to make the majority of the fan base happy because for all intents and purposes, they extended the event from Saturday for 9 hours to Monday morning. So it was basically 36 hours of this event. Now, I knew some people wouldn't be happy because sometimes you usually just can't make people happy. And we talked to people who'd flown in from Paraguay. Somebody flew in from South America for this. And they said there were people who came from as far away as Europe and Australia. Australia is the big one. That's the other side of the planet.
It is a 24-hour flight there.
That's brutal. So I read that there is a person out in California who is trying to sue Niantic over this.
First I read it and then I sent it to you.
I'd seen the article myself, but I hadn't been able to click on it. And he supposedly wants to make the suit go class action because he does not believe that he was properly given what was promised, even though I would make the case that not only was he given what was promised, you were able to catch the special Pokemon that were there. You were able to catch the raids. In fact, they made the raid Pokemon even easier. If you were within the 2 miles of Chicago, you were guaranteed to catch the legendaries if you could beat the legendaries. That's why I have 2 Articuno and 2 Lugia now. And I think it's going to be dropped personally because I don't think there's enough of a basis. Yes, the event itself was garbage, but unless you left at 7 p.m., unless you left immediately, it was still what you wanted it to be. We interacted with a few people the Sunday before we left, and they all said the same thing. They go, I can't believe how poorly this was handled. I'm really disappointed. And I go, how long have you been playing? They go, since the beginning. They go, okay, so let's be honest. You knew it was going to go like this. And without fail, they all said, yeah. Because this is just how it was like reliving the first 3 months of the game. Overall, I would say the event was a net positive only because we still got everything we went up there for, and they extended the bonuses out until Thursday. So you hatched eggs 3 times as fast, got double XP, double Stardust, got Buddy Candy faster, got twice as much candy. Like, it was hard to be too upset. So I know that there's some people who are still upset. I myself have already used my $100 in coins to max out all my item slots and Pokemon slots. And I bought like 30 raid passes. So I'm more than okay with it. But anyways, I figured I would give a truncated version of the Pokemon Go Fest because I originally had wanted to record a mini-sode after the festivities were over, but it ended up being a total nightmare. So it got pushed back to a blurb in the next podcast we recorded. Moving off of that, Brent had a topic he wanted to discuss briefly, and that topic is Spider-Man games. Now, Brent, why don't you tell us why you wanted to discuss Spider-Man games?
So I got this idea from, first off, because the movie came out. It's an idea I want to start doing. I know I did the video game movies and movie video games a while ago, and instead I want to touch on specific franchises when big movies are coming out. And since we were on such a hiatus, web channel that I watch, they do, it's called Mr. Sunday's Movies. They do Caravan of Garbage, and they play some crappy video games every once in a while. Some are good, not many.
Not many. There's not a lot of humor value in good games.
There's not.
Sometimes.
But they did a few of the Spider-Man games, and I watched them do it, some that I'd never played. And we're going to talk. I grabbed a few Spider-Man games to talk about, because there are a lot of Spider-Man games.
There are a ton of Spider-Man. It happens when a franchise has been around since the 60s.
And you can throw your franchise on everything from diapers to doorknobs.
Right.
I chose a few, several of which I've played, some you've played. So we're going to talk about them. The first one I'm going to do is, so this one was for the SNES, Game Boy, Game Gear, and the Sega Genesis.
And that was...
Spider-Man and the X-Men and Arcade's Revenge.
Now, I remember playing this when I was younger, but I was not enough of a comic nerd at that point, so I was awful at this game. I didn't know who Arcade was.
I still don't know who Arcade is. And that's me saying that.
Yeah, he's a really weird supervillain. You keep reading about it, and then I'm going to pull up a picture of Arcade.
I looked it up, a picture of him.
He's just some redhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, who likes to put people in basically video games.
It was so... I had the game for the Game Boy, which was back during the time when, I had a bunch of games. On an anecdote about that, I had a bunch of games for Game Boy. I was never good at them. Because, I was like 5, 6. I never beat them.
You still tried.
I did. Well, I had Zelda for it, and I still never beat that.
I'm about to say, in defense of that, you still have a lot of games that you tried and couldn't beat, so...
But,
I'm not sorry.
Yeah... I tried to beat this. It's hard. I think I got to... You can play as X-Men eventually. I never got past Spider... No, I did. I got to Wolverine once. And I'm like, oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever. And then I died. And since it's in arcade format, you go back to the beginning.
Well, I mean, that's just how it was back in the day.
Yeah.
So I don't know how good this game was supposed to be because I played it when I was young and I died real fast.
Right? Same here. So the next one I chose was Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage.
No, you did not play this game, correct?
I watched them play it, which was humorous, but you played it.
I played this actually with Kraus. I believe Kraus owns it. Fun trivia about that game. The cartridge is red. It was supposed to be a limited edition thing. Like, you got in on this early. You get the special red cartridge. They only ever did one printing. So that's the only cartridge. Now, this game, I'm not going to say I was too young to be good at it. It just felt like a generic beat 'em up.
Street Fighter.
Well, no, Streets of Rage.
Okay.
I was about to say, Street Fighter was just a fighting game. This was just a beat 'em up.
Double Dragon.
Double Dragon is also a beat 'em up.
That's what I meant.
And you can play as Venom or Spider-Man, and the goal is to, if you're familiar with the Maximum Carnage comic, Carnage takes over New York City, unless I'm wrong, and he gives birth to 5 Carnage babies. And the boss at the end of each stage is a Carnage baby. And that's pretty much the whole thing. I don't remember it being very good or very engaging, and much like most things in the 90s for comics, the designs for all of the Carnage babies were so doofy.
Yeah.
So doofy.
Yeah. So the next one is the Spider-Man for the 64 and PS1.
Now, we will note that the Arcade's Revenge one came out just because they wanted to make a Spider-Man X. They wanted to make a Marvel game.
Yeah.
The Maximum Carnage one tried to capitalize on what was supposed to be an enormous comic event. Whether or not it was, I wasn't huge into comics at that point, but it was something that was big enough that I knew what the event was. Now, the PS1 Spider-Man game didn't appear to coincide with anything in particular, did it?
I think it was...
They just wanted to put it...
I think it was riding off the high of the cartoon series.
That would make sense. Okay.
Maybe it had some similar voice actors. That part I'd have to look up. It had to have voice actors.
It did
I know I heard them have voice actors.
I'm positive because I remember some of the weird voices.
Yeah, I'm thinking of J. Jonah Jameson right now. Like the plot, you you're stuck in the high-rise above New York City, which is funny because much like the in-joke at Marvel when Spider-Man would shoot his web off the comic panel and you couldn't see a building, he was obviously grabbing onto a helicopter.
Obviously.
That's obviously how you fly around in this game since you were on top of every building.
And I remember you didn't play this, did you?
I did not. I watched people play it.
And you said the Let's Plays you watched were brutal to this game.
Well, and we had a friend that Philip played it once with me around. So
I don't remember it being that bad. Now, they tore it apart.
They enjoyed it. I wouldn't say tore it apart.
I thought you said they were very critical.
They were, I mean, it would be cool. I mean, it would be good not to just be stuck above the buildings.
Yeah, I think there were other stages where you weren't just stuck in buildings, like there were...
Well, not just in buildings, above
buildings.
Because you can't, plot point, you can't go to the ground because at a science expo, Doc Ock attacks, releasing a poison all over New York City. So if you drop below, you just die.
Do you die or do you just scramble back up the side?
I think it's one of those, you fell, now you're back above.
Okay. I don't remember this game being that bad, and they had a quote-unquote original villain for the final boss.
Who was that?
Doc Carnage. The Carnage symbiote got on Doc Ock, and it just chased you out. Let's see if
Before Venom, Scorpion, or...
Yeah, let's see, Doc Carnage. Now, that game, as far as you know, was only... Oh, God, it's worse than I remember. Oh, it's called Monster Ock, my bad.
Is this going to be one of those things that has to be in the comments section?
Yeah. So, yeah, like this is just a lose-lose. It's terrible on a lot of levels. So, Monster Ock. Gotta remember to put that Monster Ock underline. Okay, gross. Okay,
now on to the last three.
Now, these are the ones that you really wanted to focus on.
Well, yeah, these are the movie games. The first one I never played, you did. And
I did.
It is more level-based. It is an open city like the other ones.
Correct. You go through, and it's based off the first Spider-Man movie that had Tobey Maguire.
Yep.
And I remember thinking it wasn't that bad. And when we went and checked reviews were actually pretty decent.
Yeah, it was like 77.
75, 80. Nothing world-shattering, but nothing terrible either. No. And it was a serviceable action platformer. The fighting was pretty decent. It was a linear game, so... I mean, we were in middle school, so my standards weren't particularly high. But I remember enjoying it well enough. I also remember that you could cheese the system that if you used the level select and you went to the final cutscene, that counted as having beaten the game on whatever difficulty you set it to. So you could beat the game on the hardest difficulty by beating the final cutscene on the hardest difficulty. Yeah. Now, mind you, this was just watching a cutscene because they hadn't had the massive surge of QTEs at that point.
They had not.
Yeah, we're going to talk about QTEs on a different episode, too.
There'll be a lot of ranting there.
There will be a lot of ranting. It will be the rise and fall. But anyways, you never played that one. I thought it was pretty decent, but at that point, I wasn't going to own a PS2, GameCube, or Xbox for still some time.
I did play Spider-Man 2 based on the second movie with Tobey Maguire.
So most of the Spider-Man games for a while were based on these movies.
Yeah. And there were ones that came out in between them, I think.
I don't recall that. I remember after the third one, they made a game called Ultimate Spider-Man, and I did play that, but let's get on to your things.
Spider-Man 2 was the open city game. I mean, it did open it up, so you had the entire city to go with. You could fight street gangs and tons of villains.
Yeah, was it actually decent for an early open world game like that?
It was praised because of being open world.
Okay, but this was back when the fact it was just open world.
I was going to say, other than that, I'm thinking like Grand Theft Auto 3 here.
Yeah, that was kind of sparse.
Yeah.
You can't really go back and play that now without being like, ugh.
These are boxcars.
Yeah.
What is this? Who are they?
But anyways, to the Spider-Man thing, having not played it, did they include a lot of the side villain stuff? Like you saw that the Arkham games are notable for how much of the deep lore they incorporate into it.
Yeah, but it's like the other Spider-Man games leading up to it. They just kind of add other villains in that you can go after.
All right.
I wouldn't say the side quests are as lore heavy.
Well, it's also Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man isn't as lore heavy. Dude, he does not have a notable rogues gallery. I am going to stand by that because there's some comics where
the face I just gave him was questioning at best.
Well, because if for someone who isn't you, can you name... You think the average person can name the Sinister Six?
Some of them, not all of them.
No, average. Average. They cannot. Because who's going to be like, oh yeah, Hydro Man. Oh yeah, Shock... Is it Electro?
Depends on the version.
Yeah, right? See where I'm going with this? Nobody's going to be... The only reason people our age even know the collection is because of that cartoon.
Yeah.
There's no way people will be like, I love Mysterio. Though I do want him to be the villain in the next movie.
Even though it's probably going to be...
It's going to be Scorpion. There's no doubt about it.
It's going to be Ultimate Scorpion.
Anyways, to get back on... So... You enjoyed Spider-Man 2. I never played it.
Spider-Man 3.
Now, there's an interesting bit of trivia that comes with Spider-Man 3 because there were 2 different versions of it.
Yeah, Brett's going to go off on this one.
Okay, go for it.
So, yeah, there are 2 different versions. Spider-Man 3 was an open city game, just like the second one. New York was bigger. It was twice the size of it was in the second game, I believe. I looked it up. Oh, you could go off to smaller islands off Manhattan. In between it and, like, whatever. You can drive from Manhattan into New Jersey, can't you?
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't play the third one.
I'm talking about real life.
Oh. I don't know. I've never been there.
You were not helping.
Hey, man.
Anyways, there are 2 versions because Spider-Man 3 had the privilege of coming out during the transition period between consoles.
Yes, indeed it did.
So there was the PS2 Wii version and then the PS3 360 version.
And there was actually a special detail about the PS3 version.
And I will get to that. So, in the PS2 version, it's pretty much a better version of the movie. Because the story has, Venom doesn't just walk up to Sandman and be like, hey dude, we don't like Spider-Man. Let's work together and attack him. Because that's what I do. This is my comic book origin. He instead kidnaps his daughter.
Which actually gives him a motivation.
Yeah, right? But that's not what Sam Raimi wanted to go with. He wanted dance numbers.
I'm about to say, that pretty much sealed the fate on the whole Spider-Man trilogy.
But about halfway through the game, you get the Venom suit.
In the
PS2 Wii game, you get the Venom suit. So the villains increase in strength. So as you're going along, you have the Venom suit, you have more strength, so the villains are harder. I stopped when I thought I was getting too far in the main story because I'm like, I'm going to get this when I get a PS3, and I want the PS3 version because it's the Sony one, so it comes with downloadable, the new Goblin skin, something else, and you can play as Venom.
Could you?
Yeah.
I just thought you got the black suit all the time.
You got to play Venom.
Oh.
So when you play the game, I get it for the PS3, I start playing it, and I get to the same point in the PS2 one and the Wii one where you get the Venom suit. No Venom suit. And I keep going. I'm like, I'm going to get it eventually. I must have missed something. And I start running into the same kind of villains that I ran into in the second one where I had the Venom suit. And they're harder. Turns out that in the PS3 360 version, you don't get the Venom suit until you beat the game.
Awesome.
Which makes it really hard. So I never ended up beating it.
And so began a long trend of Brent not beating games. I'm kidding. You had games you didn't beat long before that. Anyways, besides that, so you never beat either version?
No.
Nice.
It's a sore topic.
Yeah, I could imagine that. Now, what Spider-Man games have you played since then?
None.
So that's been rapidly approaching a decade.
Over a decade.
Now, I played Ultimate Spider-Man, which I thought was a pretty solid game. I didn't think it was, pow, this will change the world. But I thought it was fun enough. I beat it pretty straightforward. I'm not super awesome with those open world superhero games because I feel like they cater to a very specific subset of fan. And I'm usually not that fan. So I remember enjoying it because I remember I got the special edition that had the holographic Venom on the front. So I thought that was pretty cool. but I don't really remember much other than the fact that Carnage was a weird mutated Peter thing. Oh yeah, Carnage and Venom both existed to try and eat cancer.
So it was the Ultimate Venom?
Well, it's called Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
Did you not put that together?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
But when you're like mutated, yeah, it's the Ultimate version.
So there doesn't appear to have been, correct me if I'm wrong, no explicit game tying into the Spider-Man Homecoming.
No, that's because there hasn't been for any of those Marvel MCU movies.
Right.
Since Thor.
Right. Yeah, we actually discussed that, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. And however, there is a independent Spider-Man game coming out developed by Naughty Dog, or is it Insomniac? I think it's Insomniac. And they showed that at this E3, and we talked about it in our E3 podcast. And unless I'm wrong, Brent, I believe you are the most gung-ho for that.
It looks good.
It looks very good.
I don't know if I'm going to buy it day one. If it's good enough, I may pick it up. Yeah.
I really don't think that I'm going to pick it up. Not that I dislike Spider-Man, but I mean...
It's definitely going to be the open world superhero game.
Yeah, the one that I was just discussing with you that I think I'm basically exit stage left on these.
I mean, generally when it comes to superhero games, it's a pretty hit or miss thing.
But do you feel going through these different Spider-Man games, has there been a distinct uptick in quality?
In the ones we talked about? Possibly.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Possibly. In the ones we talked about, there's a chance. You could say that about anything.
Yes.
Okay.
From the Game Boy game to the PS3 one, yeah.
And that's beyond just an increase in the capabilities of the hardware. It seemed like they were generally more interested in bringing you an engaging experience rather than a cash-in.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, well, they weren't made by... Well, never mind. I was going to say, they weren't made by Activision or LJN, but I'm positive these were made by Activision.
Yeah, about to say, I'm pretty sure... I remember... No, one of them was made by Neversoft, which I think is an Activision.
Yeah.
Or I could be thinking of Tony Hawk. Anyways. Well, Spider-Man was in one of those Tony Hawk games.
So was Darth Maul.
We're talking about Spider-Man, Brent. Spider-Man, focus.
I think he was in the first one, actually.
Yeah, maybe. Anyways, so what else would you like to mention about Spider-Man games?
I think we're good. I retroactively wanted to do this one to start a series I'd like to do.
Okay.
When some other big movies come out.
And what would the next theoretical one be?
Possibly Justice League. Some DC comic thing. Possibly Batman by then.
Yeah, I should have Batman wrapped up, and hopefully we'll be able to do a nice, meaty episode about the Arkham series. Yes. But if you're done with that, I think we'll segue onto the final topic of the evening, one that I mostly expect you to just relish. Because there's been a weird trend over the last handful of years, and I'm positive it's existed outside the last handful of years, but it's only really become mainstream in America in the last handful, I want to say. Now, I'm going to warn any listeners that this could get a little raunchy, just because of the nature of what we're talking about. During the PS2 era, and prior to that, there wasn't a lot of exposure to visual novel style games. A visual novel style game is one in which you don't have a ton of gameplay. It's mostly reading. It's basically like a choose your own adventure for the most part. In the most basic ones, there is a wrong end, like the most basic choose your own adventures, and when you make a decision, you've made the wrong one and the game ends shortly thereafter. In a lot of cases, you have branching paths, and those branching paths can take you to different endings. However, something I've seen in the last few years is a uptick in weird dating simulators. Now, a lot of dating simulators to me can be classified as very similar to visual novels, but a lot of these do have gameplay types. So the most recent one that prompted this discussion was Kraus asked me relatively recently, he goes, "What in the world is up with this game called Dream Daddy?" I'm glad you asked, sir, because I actually have a bit of a bias on this one. The reason I have a bias is because it was put out by Game Grumps, which is the Let's Play I listen to daily. And Okay, again, I'm going to warn everybody that it's going to get a little bluer than usual from this point out. The point is, you are a single dad who moves into a new town, and you can romance other single dads. That includes gay sex. That's just a fact. Now, it's actually getting really strong reviews, at least personal reviews from users, because I guess it's way better written and designed than they anticipated. Now, there have been some downfalls, and that can be expected from a first-time game. They're saying that the voice quality could use a little improvement. I'm hearing some people say that there's not enough daddy dates to go on. Now, I have not played this game because, as other people have said, it seems just kind of like a jokey gimmick thing, but other people are saying that they actually enjoyed the depth of writing involved, which a well-written game of this type can have that be surprisingly deep. So I decided to do a little research into other games that could potentially be classified as weird dating simulators. Some of these will overlap with a more visual novel style than dating sims. So you'll have to forgive me for the people who are hardcore about this and listen to this. I truly apologize. Anyways, I've noticed when doing the research that there appeared to be a bit of an uptick in unusual dating sims with the prevalence of Kickstarter. Some that come to mind are there is a game called Stay DPRK, which is a parody of Go Go Nippon, which in Go Go Nippon, I believe is called, you go to Japan to visit your pen pals, and it turns out that their names were actually female names, and you're supposed to try and engage in a romantic relationship with one of these two females. Stay DPRK is where you go to North Korea, and it's to attractive anime girls, and I believe they patched in
Kim Jong-un?
No, he was already in it. They call him Gloriously. I did hear that got a little flack because they didn't quite thoroughly research the military part of it. There's a lot of actual North Korea facts, but they don't get, it's the little details, like how would an officer address the supreme leader as opposed to how would a civilian address the supreme leader. Just little details.
Did they go over and how in the 80s in that building on the DMZ where they ripped over the South Korean?
Probably not.
Fun facts.
Is that fun? That sounds like a nightmare.
If it helps.
No.
Now the South Koreans have a new strategy where it takes 3 people to go in the building, each one holding on to the next one to the door.
Oh my god. Anyways, so that one has been called, they came out and said that was just a parody, so I don't want to be too overwhelmingly harsh on it, but another kickstarted dating sim was, I can't remember the exact name because it's ridiculous, but you date girls who are anthropomorphic tanks.
I feel like I've heard of this.
Yes. Nick has played this one. He got it as a gag gift, and you date girls who are anthropomorphic tanks, but still tanks. Apparently, on Steam, it's got really solid reviews because I guess people love tanks. Like, who is this for? But people are still playing it.
Obviously the guy who's playing Arma 3 who needs a relationship.
I guess, or World of Tanks, I guess. So, these were just 2 examples.
It's just like when I asked you, is that game coming out for FF15 really a fishing simulator?
And yes.
And I said, I was unaware of the Venn diagram of fishing simulator people to Final Fantasy people.
Apparently it's big enough that they made, and it's called Panzermodels. And with 772 reviews on Steam, it is rated 9 out of 10. Yep. Panzermodels, the first dating simulator to deliver a thoughtful look at tanks and the men who date them.
Please tell me there are pictures.
Oh yeah, are you kidding me? They're 100% as pictures. I also don't believe I will be posting anything from the dating sim portion because, check it out, my Sherman. It's a Sherman tank. It's a tank. Well, because it does like the anime style. Like this one, those are the anthropomorphic tanks. So, yeah, I don't
anime
know.
girls turn into 5th grader drawn tanks.
I guess. Wow, there's some raunchy pictures on here. Ooh. Anyways. So, the last Kickstart one, so that one has decent reviews, but there's one that gained horrendous notoriety. Well, significant notoriety. I want to say horrendous. It's called Honey Pop. And, yeah, get your giggles out because it's going to get worse. I saw a lot of reviews for this because it came under a lot of fire because the premise behind it when it was kickstarted was it's a light RPG match 3 dating sim type game with explicit content. And why it really got notoriety was Steam cracked down on that explicit content. So it got a bunch of free press because it became a big deal that they were censoring it. And people who are reviewing it's like, this actually isn't a bad game. It's a little jarring when you get to the explicit sexual content. So after reading so many of these reviews, I'm like, I wonder how this game is. Because I'm like, I like light puzzle elements. I like light RPG elements. And I love pornography. So
why can't you have all 3 in one?
I'm about to say. So now hear me out because it's going to start... It's already in a bad place, but it's going to start in a different bad place. So I downloaded a pirated version of it. And before I knew it, I downloaded it at like 9 o'clock at night. And I looked down like, it's 2 a.m. and I've beaten this game. So I messaged Nick the next day. And I'm like, ethically, if you had pirated a game and beaten it, would you still buy it? And he goes, normally, if I beat it that fast, I would be a little on the fence, but you did go through the whole game. And I'm like, okay. On an unrelated note, I think I have to buy Honey Pop. And he goes, Honey Pop? Yes. The game where you play a modified Candy Crush to unlock porn. Yes. He goes, that doesn't really feel like your jam. And I go, what part of that is not my jam? I guess that really is entirely your jam, isn't it? I'm like, it 100% is, sir. It 100% is. So, long story short, I bought Honey Pop. And all the pirated things I'd done carried over to my Steam version. So I have like 33% of the achievements unlocked like that. Yeah.
Well, silver lining.
I guess. So, that was the whole gambit. These were all Kickstarted games. Kickstarter gave people who may not have had the resources necessarily to create these unusual niche games. A lot of people may have had these ideas but not had a way to express them because they lacked the financial resources. So with Kickstarter, especially back when all this stuff was like 2013, 2014, basically if you have even a mild proof of concept, they'd give you money back then. And these all had mild proof of concepts because visual novels / dating sims do not seem like the most resource-intensive things. There's very few things, I would imagine, that you can mess up, like not a ton of crash bugs that you can have. Now, going even deeper into the rabbit hole, one that did jump out at me was there was a game called Hatoful Boyfriend. Does this mean anything to you?
No. Maybe.
In 2011, yeah, I need to make sure that I have some weird notes on here. In 2011, a Japanese developer, so there's your front warning, created a dating simulator. In that dating simulator, you can date pigeons.
Oh.
Yes. So that game was brought to the West in 2014. It was brought to the PC at first, and it was actually brought to PlayStation in 2015.
Is it terrible that you said Japanese developer and pigeon was not where my mind went to first?
Ooh, don't worry. Don't worry. So apparently this game got really strong reviews because people said, for being about pigeons, it's surprisingly well written. And then, because of course this is where it's going to go, after you complete all the pigeon dating parts, it unlocks Will You Fulfill the Promise, because you make some kind of promise to one of the pigeons. And at that point, it becomes the Bad Boy Life storyline, where apparently your protagonist gets murdered and it becomes a murder mystery. From that point on, it becomes a murder mystery criminal thriller. But it got good reviews. Like, what do you do when a game sounds so absolutely bizarre, but they're like, it's actually really solid? You can't fault it. So I just think it's fascinating. And though I'm sure there were games like this before, especially if you go into the Japanese side of things, there's some H games that are raunchy and weird.
And see, that's where I thought we were going.
We're not going there explicitly. See what I did there?
Uh-huh.
Right? The last one I'm going to bring up is, it was brought to my attention at this point over a handful of years ago that 4chan was going to band together to put out a game. Now, the expression that you just made perfectly summarizes how everybody thought this was going to go. Because the premise of the game, I'm going to warn you now, it immediately sounds tasteless, was that you could date disabled girls, like physically handicapped females. And immediately people are like, this is outrageously insensitive. This is 4chan, of course it's going to be. Now, in 2012, the game, and I'm going to butcher this, Katawa Shoujo came out, and it was put out by, I think they called themselves 4-Leaf Studios, because the 4chan logo is
Yes.
Now, what really blew people away was the game was incredibly well received. Nobody saw that coming, because the premise of the game is that you play as a character who turns out has a congenital heart defect, so he has to get transferred to a school where people with health problems go in order to be better accommodated. Now, when you transfer there, all the potential love interests have been living with their disability their entire life and are fully formed individuals who have learned how to deal with their adversity and live with it. You are the one who actually has to figure out how to adjust to the life and interact with these people who are so effectively living with their difference. So everybody was shocked at the unbelievably metered way that this was approached. In fact, so much so that a lot of the reviews said, yeah, I actually was forming a pretty deep emotional resonance with these characters, to the point where I forgot that at the end, this still has scenes of pornography in it. So I was interacting with one of these females, and suddenly we're in a shed going at it. Like, it's out of nowhere. It kind of takes you out of the moment. But as people have went from a point where when they were younger, making games was like a fable. It was something that could only be done by huge companies, and it was really only what they wanted. They got the tools to make a game where you can create a surprisingly nuanced dating simulator with people who are differently abled, where you can create a shockingly deep pigeon romance simulator turned murder mystery, where you can create a parody of a popular Japanese dating sim based in North Korea, or a shockingly impressive pornographic match 3 dating sim game, or even this one where they have a gay dad dating simulator. These have all been shockingly well received for the most part, which I think, and I'm not going to go all social justice on this because that's not what I'm trying to do. I just really like how wide. I don't think that these are just appealing to a select subset of people. I think it's allowing people to look at perspectives well outside what they would normally do. So,
I was about to say, the 4chan one, I'm shocked that the selection isn't a bunch of memes for every time you have to answer to the female.
Now, there are bad endings. Now, I'm going to go on a quick aside about this one. There is a more traditional dating simulator, and I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called like School Life or something. It's Japanese, and it's dark. Now, this isn't non-traditional. The only reason it's non-traditional is that everybody can go a relatively dark way. So some of them include if you end up spurning one girl, at the end of the game, she'll shove your girlfriend in front of a train. If you spurn a different girl, she'll commit suicide by jumping off a roof.
God.
If you try to go for the ending where you romance multiple at the same time and mess up even a little bit, there will be vicious disembowelings. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and actually call that non-standard, but it was put out by an actual development thing. So, I just think, I really like, though it doesn't seem like the tack I would have taken given how this started, I really like all these unusual dating sim games. Because I think it allows people to creatively express themselves, even if the joke it doesn't even have to be a joke. Some people are actually just interested in dating other dads. Like, how often, and again, not trying to go social justice, but it's a bunch of other single dads. Like, how often do you see a single dad represented in a medium like that as something to be gone after?
Yeah.
And how unique is the challenge of trying to write actual nuanced dialogue for pigeons? And apparently they succeeded.
In that North Korean one, when you're in the sexy time, if at the end of it, if the Supreme Leader does not burst through the door and say, hey, then I'm not down. I'm just not down.
I have a hunch that you're not down regardless, but in doing some research, apparently within the last couple months, they did an H patch. So I'm kind of curious what changed. Really glad that I stopped listening to the Let's Play at work, though. Really glad I stopped listening to the Let's Play. So I am thoroughly curious, though I doubt any of our listener base has a extensive experience with dating sims. I know some games have dating sims, like Persona 5 has a big back and forth that has to do with interacting with other people. But who has played any of these kinds of games? If so, what did you really like about them? I'm legit curious about this. But I think that about brings us to a good point to wrap this up. Brent, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No.
Okay. So, if you went to Pokemon Go Fest, I would love to hear your story. If you have an anecdote about a Spider-Man game that you associate with a particularly strong memory, let us know. If you have any experience with any of these dating sims, standard or non-standard, go ahead and drop that anecdote. But until next time, Brent, thank you for coming on.
Yep.
And my name is Josh, and until next time, this is Co-Opinions.